Thanks for inviting me, and it also just really good to speak on the platform with people from a really broad range of campaigns and parties as well. I think that's going to be a really important part of our campaign to stand up to UKIP. In 2013, Nigel Farage did a speaking tour across different regions of the UK, which he called the Talking Sense Tour. It was the tour during which he talked about how horrified he was that there were becoming ghettos in parts of England where one couldn't hear English being spoken at all. But during that tour, Nigel Farage predicted that there would be a political earthquake in the UK in the European elections of May of this year, and he was absolutely correct in that prediction, because, as Catherine said, they got 27.5% of the vote. It was the first time since the general election of 1906 that any other political party than the Tories or Labour have hit the top in an election in that way. Further to that, you think about now the by-election that has been called inside of Clacton, where we've had Douglas Cardwell defecting from the Tories. He was shown a poll that was conducted by UKIP in his constituency that told him if he was to stand with UKIP, he would be far more likely to be elected than if he stood as a Tory. His defection will mean that a by-election on the 9th of October is likely to see him elected. I would be very, very surprised if Douglas Cardwell is not elected as a UKIP MP in Clacton. And there are other MPs that UKIP are also targeting in the same way, and they are not just Tory MPs, they are targeting Labour MPs as well to come over to UKIP. They stand much less chance, of course, of doing that, but we shouldn't be complacent in thinking that it's just in Tory areas that UKIP are going to target. Farage's strategy really is that he thinks that come the general election in 2015 he can get himself a handful of MPs. Now I suggest actually that he will get more MPs than he thought he was going to, because if they play it right and they win the Clacton by-election, actually you may well see more defections of Tories taking place, more by-elections running up to a real head of steam up to the general election in 2015. But Farage's prediction is that Labour will win that election, that people will then become disillusioned with Labour, and it will be UKIP's turn next. So they have a long-term strategy of where they want to go, and I think we have to take it very seriously as to what's taking place. Because really, their politics, I think, are the politics of the gutter. Their racism, I think, is absolutely foul. I mean, you know, it's not just about the fact that we have, you know, you could pull out individual, closet racist loons and nut jobs, I think was the phrase that David Cameron used. I mean, he should know, a lot of them were his ex-colleagues, I suppose, but that was the phrase that was used about them. But it's not just that there are isolated individuals like that. What UKIP has done is to pull the whole of the political agenda to the right, to make racism and to build on the racism that already exists in society, to push that agenda even further. They are thoroughly anti-working class in their policies as well. They wanted to see a flat rate of tax, they for the full privatisation of the National Health Service. Now, of course, they've abandoned a lot of their policies at the moment, but on the 27th of September at their national conference they will release their manifesto, and I would suggest that we will see absolutely the same policies that we see from the Tory party and in fact from most of the mainstream parties, which is to back the market, to back big business and to attack ordinary people and their services. I think they're also a homophobic party as well. I want to come back onto that later. But you see, really when you think about what UKIP represent, at the same time that Nigel Farage was doing his Talking Sense tour across the UK in 2013, Stuart Wheeler, who is UKIP's treasurer, who was in fact one of the top 2,000 richest people in the UK. He made the single biggest donation to the Tory party of £5 million, and then recently made a donation to UKIP, which meant he was expelled and came over to be their treasurer. Stuart Wheeler was holding meetings in the City of London. Now, at those meetings, don't think for one moment that Stuart Wheeler was getting up, going rah, 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 just about immigrants or about ghettos. No, no, no. Stuart Wheeler was putting the economic case against Europe. The reasons why there are sections of British business who believe that because they trade predominantly in Southeast Asia, in the United States, for example, or outside of the European Union, that the EU, with its restrictive practices on workers and so on, is a problem for them. These people are building a base amongst a section of British business, and they are then using racist populism to try and build a base amongst a section of British voters. And the impact, of course, politically, is that as soon as UKIP set out their stall, the Tories have followed them in trying to scapegoat immigrants even further. Disgracefully, we've then seen Ed Miliband actually come alongside that as well, and I have to say, because of course we have Catherine here, and we know for a fact that people like Diane Abbott, Jeremy Corbyn, there are a whole number of people inside the Labour Party who are resisting the urge for Labour to be pulled to the right because UKIP are setting a political agenda, but that is what UKIP are doing. And there are three things, I would argue, that have helped them to grow, and of course the right across Europe. Firstly, I think the levels of racism and Islamophobia inside of society have helped UKIP massively. Secondly, the economic crisis has also helped them, because it's been about dividing and blaming other people and not those people who really caused the crisis in the first place. And thirdly, I think the crisis of the mainstream political parties, whether you see it being through the expenses scandal that took place, these were the things that have allowed UKIP to come through, and for a Nigel Farage to appear as if he is the ordinary man of the people, the person who says what ordinary politicians don't dare to say. And that's what makes them so dangerous. And therefore I think we have to say that actually we cannot ignore UKIP in any way, shape or form, because actually what their agenda is going to do, I think, is going to push things further to the right. The reasons why people vote UKIP, first of all, it's immigration. Secondly, it's economic crisis, and thirdly, it's Europe. Europe is not top of the list. Yeah, it's their racism which is really what they're really pushing. And who votes for them? Of course, mainly Tories, but they are pulling some Labour voters as well. So we cannot be complacent about that at all.